Welcome to the deep dive. You have handed us a truly extraordinary stack of source material today.
That's
It
incredible.
feels less like one single story and more like, I don't know, a set of simultaneous forensic reports.
That's a good way to put it.
We're looking at two parallel worlds, really, both running incredibly high on, on adrenaline and trauma.
Right.
One is just so cold, external, all about logistics, this paramilitary operation.
And the other is searingly internal. It's driven entirely by raw psychological agony, by fever dreams.
Exactly. Our mission today is to treat these very different events as a single integrated chronicle.
That's right. We have to analyze the why and the how, not just what happened, but the motivations, the power dynamics.
And the deep emotional reckoning that's really driving these characters.
We're going to be moving between, the cold calculations of geopolitics and just the raw interiority of pain.
The contrast is everything, isn't it? And it demands real precision. So on one side, we've got this AFR operation, highly controlled, but you get the sense it's getting more and more desperate.
It is.
And it's focused on locating a primary target. He's called the Master Entertainment, or the Veiled Performer, M40A.
And they're trying to do that by acquiring his immediate family members. It's all about leverage and control.
And we have to be careful with the names here because the AFR leader is also named M40A.
Yes, exactly. Let's just call him the leader, 40A, to keep it straight from the target, who is also M40A.
Okay, good call. So the leader 40A's operation is, well, it's failing.
It's failing, and that failure is forcing them into this extreme violent pivot.
And then on the other side, we are just completely immersed in the consciousness of a character named Gately.
Totally different world.
His intense physical pain is from some kind of severe injury, and that pain is the trigger. It's what unlocks these unbelievably vivid, complex memories.
And these symbolic fever dreams, yeah. All about morality, shame, sacrifice.
And what seems to be the ultimate truth of death and motherhood, it gets deep.
It really does.
So you, our listener, you're getting a critical context of these two realities. We're going to pull out the tension, the power dynamics driving both that external mission, the cold act of kidnapping, and the internal struggle, the search for clarity.
We need to understand why these people are prepared to sacrifice everything, both internally and externally.
Okay, let's unpack this. And I think we have to start with the cold efficiency, or maybe the cold fury at the AFR command level.
Yes.
Because this operation is clearly on the verge of just falling apart.
What jumps out immediately in that AFR context is this overwhelming, you can almost feel it, this palpable sense of failure.
It's what's driven them to this point.
Exactly. This isn't some measured strategy. The sources call it the finally most drastic operation. It's a Hail Mary. It's a result of just repeated failures.
And the sources confirm that history of failure, don't they? Operatives like Remy Marathe, Asuwiki, and Balbalis.
Names we're getting here again?
Right. They'd all filed negative reports before in their search for the target M40 or his work. They just kept coming up empty.
So this forces them to pivot to this extreme action, the public acquisition of the auteur's family members.
The pressure from the top must be immense.
Which is what makes the command structure so dangerously unstable.
And that instability is just perfectly personified by the leader, Fortier, and his interaction with M. Bruliem.
Oh, absolutely. Fortier is practical, he's strategic, yes. But he's also prone to these explosive fits of rage when things don't go according to plan.
The Bruliem incident it's genuinely shocking.
It is.
But it perfectly illustrates the stakes. And this unique culture of the AFR Bruliem was thrown into technical trouble killing.
Right, because his crucial field tests of viewer willingness were irrevocably contaminated. The data was just spoiled.
But the nature of the contamination is what is so bizarre and specific to this world.
It's so detailed. You have this test subject, eccentrically dressed in a white wig, carrying foreign cookware and tiny women's undergarments.
What a collection of items.
And he was discovered severing the digits of a second subject.
A second one who was misdressed, weakened, addicted.
And the contamination wasn't just the severing, it was the substitution.
Right. The wigged subject was severing someone else's fingers and pushing those under a door instead of his own, which we have to assume was the whole point of the test.
And that one specific act of substitution completely marred the statistics of Bruliem's experiment.
It just shows you how fragile their whole cold mathematical system is when you're faced with, unpredictable, chaotic human will.
Wait, I have to stop us there. We're talking about digits being severed and pushed under a door. And the primary concern of the AFR command is that it marred the statistics.
It sounds almost cartoonish, but the consequence is terrifyingly real.
It is terrifying because it exposes their whole value system. For the AFR, data integrity is everything.
It's paramount.
And Brouillan's statistical failure was so severe that Fortier, acting purely out of anger only, considered letting Brouillan conduct a lethal technical interview of the man who contaminated the data.
A lethal. So executing someone over bad statistics, is that rage really strategic, or is Fortier just completely unstable?
The sources suggest it's both. He's practical enough to know the mission has to succeed, but his rage is so potent that he views execution as a justifiable response to what is basically an administrative data breach.
It shows you the raw, volatile power dynamic at the top.
Yeah, data failure justifies lethal consequences. That level of arbitrary, rage-fueled tyranny makes Fortier a terrifying, unpredictable force, even to his own people.
And yet he doesn't stick around. He doesn't oversee the cleanup or this really critical acquisition.
No, he's gone. He departs immediately for a technical interview of more importance in Phoenix.
Which he found amusing just because of the name.
Right. That decision just signals the hierarchy of threats, you know. The Phoenix meeting with Mademoiselle Luria P. must be absolutely critical to their larger objective.
It overrides even the immediate need to get the family members.
It does. And it also signals Fortier's deep trust in Waite. He's the one left to manage this difficult, preliminary, and potentially disastrous phase of the acquisition while Fortier handles the high-level meeting.
So Waite is now running the show from Cambridge, having already made his decision and call on the strategy. But they immediately run into this really strange logistical problem.
They can't just rush the target, the
Right.
Academy of Tennis.
And this is the first detail that just elevates the absurdity of their strategy.
It's incredible. The sources state they cannot execute a direct assault because the AFRs fear nothing in this hemisphere except tall and steep hillsides.
Steep hillsides, a paramilitary force is constrained by topography?
I know.
Why would that be? I mean, is it a subtle hint about their vehicles? Maybe they're not designed for inclines, or is this like a psychological thing?
It's a functional, rigid constraint, and it dictates their entire indirect approach. Whether it's logistics or some deeper psychological fear, the result is the same.
The operation has to rely on cunning, deceit, and substitution.
Instead of just brute force, they are forced to acquire the family indirectly.
And that indirect approach is such a dangerous gambit, acquiring and replacing the Quebec tennis children who are already on their way to the U.S. for a gala competition.
With the Academy's children, it's a classic, high-stakes bait and switch.
But it's a substitution that's complicated by just sheer implausibility. The new players, the AFR replacements, they're adults who need wheelchairs and have beards.
The discrepancy is enormous.
It's huge. And Waite, exercising remote control from his shop in Cambridge, he promises to devise an excellent ruse to explain the wheelchairs and adult beards.
An excellent
He
ruse.
speaks volumes about the level of deception required here. They're hoping a good story can cover up differences that are physically obvious. It's insane.
It confirms they intend to capture these children and put these adults in their place in a very high-profile public setting.
Right. And all to draw out the target, M. Fortier.
So this brings us to the field commander, Balbalis. He's the one who has to execute this completely implausible plan in the middle of a worsening snowstorm. Waite picks up Ballas, the one still with both legs, even though they're paralyzed and stickishly withered, to lead the detail.
Balbalis' physical condition is so relevant here. It just speaks to the level of sacrifice these operatives have made.
Absolutely.
So he drives the modified Dodge van north, and his defining trait, what makes him perfect for this job, is his absolute resilience.
He never complained.
That's it. That calmness is crucial for leading a high-stakes team that's operating under just extreme physical and environmental stress.
The journey itself places them in a very specific, tense geopolitical zone. They bypassed the Pongo checkpoint at Methuen, Massachusetts.
They're penetrating enemy territory, or at least contested territory, under the cover of this snowstorm.
And the environment itself is a character in this story. The snowfall is noted as being worse than the convexity because of the fans to the south.
That is a highly specific detail. It roots the whole operation in this zone, where even the weather is potentially managed or influenced by some underlying infrastructure. These fans.
It suggests a world where natural chaos is, or at least can be, controlled.
Then there's the pit stop. And this is where the high-level strategy just smacks right into the grim reality of these operatives.
They stop briefly in what used to be Montpelier, Vermont.
A ghost town. Unoccupied, ghostly white, bad fallout from the Champlain region. It's a relic of some past conflict, but it's a necessary stop for them.
Necessary for two very jarring reasons. First, the final assembly of the mirror, which is their weapon for the trap.
And second, for those who were incontinent to change their bags.
That juxtaposition is vital. You have this sophisticated, highly specialized paramilitary mission running right alongside the most raw, immediate bodily needs of these severely incapacitated operatives.
The high stakes don't erase the reality of physical decay.
So they press onto the execution site.
Yeah.
And the tactic they use it's brilliantly simple, but it relies on this cruel deception.
They place a large mirror across the southbound lanes of U.S. Interstate #91, just south of the provincial checkpoint.
And this is noted as an old FLQ trick.
The mechanics of it are so elegant in their ruthlessness. The tennis bus's own headlights will delude the driver into swerving to avoid this perceived inevitable crash with his own reflection.
It forces the bus violently off the road. It uses the driver's own instinct for self-preservation to guarantee the crash.
Even Balbalas's legendary composure is tested right before they do it.
Right. There's this moment of acute tension in the van because the night vision attachment for the binoculars had been misplaced.
Which, in an operation that requires precision timing in the dark, losing a critical piece of tech is a major threat.
But Balbala stays cool. The tool is located. His composure just reaffirms his control over the detail.
And the discipline is rigid. No smoking in the van while they waited. Everything is just tightly controlled for this final violent moment.
The target bus finally arrives. It's held up for a bit at the checkpoint, and the sources describe it as large, chartered, and appearing warm inside.
A symbol of the target's comfortable civilian lives, right?
A stark contrast to the cold, withered operatives waiting for them in the snow.
And now we get to the core of Balbalas's strategic ruthlessness. The contingency planning.
He is utterly focused on mission resources. If the bus is still operational after the crash, he insists on driving it. He refuses to leave the modified van behind.
Which leads to this brief argument over who has to drive the van. It's a practical conflict, but it shows his commitment to his resources over, say, crew comfort.
But the truly chilling moment, the ultimate display of ideological detachment, comes the other contingency.
If the bus is destroyed.
If the bus is destroyed or unusable, the modified van can only hold 6 of the junior children survivors. No more.
And the rest would be allowed to die for Lure pays, for their true country.
This is ideological sacrifice just externalized, reduced to cold mathematics. Life is reduced to capacity planning.
And Balbalas, the resilient commander, showed no preference one or the other way.
His complete lack of emotional investment, his willingness to just let children die based purely on logistical capacity, it defines the profound inhumanity driving this whole mission.
So the physical consequence is immediate. The AFR team is now perfectly poised, defined by this cold math and ideology, just waiting in the snow for the mirror to force the crash and provide their targets.
We've just seen the calculated coldness of sacrifice on the outside.
Right. But now let's turn to Gately, where sacrifice is intensely personal. His physical pain is the trigger that forces this shift, from the external coldness of the AFR to the internal searing heat of his psychological struggle.
This shift is so jarring, and it's immediate. We move from the controlled cold of the interstate to the inescapable searing heat of Gately's own consciousness.
And it's all defined by physical agony.
He tries to sit up, which jolts him awake, and the resulting blast of pain in his side from this severe, unnamed wound, it's so intense that he half passes back out again and lies there with rolling eyes and a round mouth.
This physical agony is the key. Pain is the lockpicker to his deepest psychological turmoil.
And the first image this trauma unlocks is a high summer motel dream, a place defined by oppressive heat and decay.
A southern motel, brutally hot. The khaki foliage is parched. The ceiling fan is turning at this frustratingly slow, second-hands rate. The whole environment just amplifies this sense of decay and inescapable suffering.
And yet, contrasted with all that decay, the broken window screen and so on, is the center of the dream. A lavish, tall, squishy 4-poster bed.
And on that bed is Joël Van Dyne, an Ennet House resident who appears as a newcomer.
The sequence starts as a kind of seduction, a promise of release. Joelle raises her veil slightly, which is a huge detail, since her face is usually hidden. to lick sweat.
And she promises Gately a PM of near-terminal pleasures.
Near-terminal pleasure. So the pleasure is intrinsically linked to a near-death state, which just reflects Gately's own proximity to agony and unconsciousness in his current reality.
She undresses slowly, revealing a body of just hyper-perfection.
An incredible female body, an inhuman body, like something you'd win in a raffle. The kind of body Gately has only ever seen in certain magazines. It's the ultimate idealized object of desire.
The ultimate release from pain.
But the erotic progression is just violently halted by this sudden symbolic intrusion, something geometrical, structural.
A fifth post forms on the four-poster, an erect post whose long dormant height suddenly obscures the nude figure.
It's a phallic, instantaneous intrusion that just shuts down the promise of pleasure. It imposes this structural, authoritarian barrier between Gately and his desired release.
And when she moves back into view, the true horror, and I think the psychological key, is revealed.
The desirable, inhuman body is still there.
Yeah.
But the face is unveiled to be the historical likeness of fucking Winston Churchill.
Complete with the cigar, the jowls, the bulldog scowl.
Wait, so you're telling me the ultimate promise of carnal pleasure is immediately replaced by a figure of historical, controlling, grotesque authority?
It's not just terrifying. It's an indictment of the dream's purpose. What is the psychological meaning of combining the ideal body with that hyper-authoritarian face?
It's the immediate transformation of promised freedom into controlling pain. The body promises release, but the face demands rigidity, obedience, historical gravity.
The ghastliness of the shock is absolute, because that juxtaposition is just impossible.
And the shock immediately causes Gately's body to go rigid, which is what rips him back into the searing physical pain of his real-world injury. The dream has perfectly embodied his trauma.
Seeking release leads only to the imposition of authority and control, which results in more pain.
So his physical pain is almost like an early warning system. It pulls him out of the dream at the precise moment the dream reveals its oppressive truth.
But the immediate terror of that Churchill dream is quickly replaced by something much, much deeper. The unresolved shame of his past.
Yes. Gately isn't just powerless over his current pain. He's now forced to confront the deep, complex trauma associated with Mrs. Waite, his childhood neighbor.
This is the chronicle of community cruelty and Gately's personal complicity and failure in it.
The memory starts with the environment, with the community's judgment. Her house was just desperately squalid. It made Gately's own abusive, squalid home look like the Taj Mahal in comparison.
The entire neighborhood's psyche throbbed with something dire about her.
But no parent could ever specify what was wrong. Only that interaction was forbidden.
And that vacuum of information just fueled the worst rumors. She's a witch, she's roasting missing kids, total contempt.
The physical evidence that supported all this was the bizarre stuff in her garage. Jars of brown, green, viscous, nameless vegetoid stuff in mayonnaise jars stacked high.
That visceral, unappetizing sight inspired absolute fear. It led the children to sneak in, break the jars, and mock her. She was the local receptacle for the neighborhood's displaced anxiety and disgust.
And yet, Gately developed this specific, complex interface with her.
It wasn't born out of love, though, or kindness. It was out of defiance and anger.
He only went over when his home life was just unbearable, when the MP was beating his mother, or when his mother was passed out in vomit.
His visits were this intentional, desperate act of violation, trying to act out his kid's anger by violating his mother's pathetic forbiddings.
It was rage masquerading as connection.
The reality of Mrs. Waite, though, it contradicted the community myth. She was lucid and continent, not a caricature.
But she radiated this specific, difficult mixture of unpleasantness and vulnerability. She had swollen, veiny ankles and dry paste at the corners of her mouth.
And that profound vulnerability, the sources explain, it instinctively made people want to be cruel. She was an emotional lightning rod.
Even Gately was afraid of her. He recounts this visceral fear from the MP's garage, screaming and nearly dropping the bench press bar on his Adam's apple when he saw her gnarly-eyed face at the smeared window.
A constant, unsettling presence.
Which brings us to the core emotional exchange, the birthday cake. Mrs. Waite, in a rare public act, left her house and brought a dark chocolate, slightly tilted cake to the sober neighbor's party.
This was an act of profound, hidden sacrifice.
Gately knew the cost. She'd given up cigarettes for weeks, and she was a chimney. She relied on Benson and Hedges just to afford the ingredients. This gift wasn't trivial,
It was a physical sacrifice of her own immediate comfort, her addiction for his birthday. It was an act of profound care.
and she afforded Gately dignity in how she delivered it. She spared him the humiliation of having the cake labeled as just his, decorating it with 4 cursive names.
Right, the 9 candles, the specific number for his age, were the private tip-off that the cake was meant for him specifically. She tried to make her act of love subtle and dignified.
To avoid the scorn her reputation would draw.
But the rejection was immediate and just devastating. The neighbor, the party mom, she accepts the cake, but neglected to invite Mrs. Waite in.
And Gately watches this profoundly dignified rejection. He sees Mrs. Waite walk away, slowly but very straightly and dignified and upright. It's a moment of profound social cruelty that he's forced to witness.
The ultimate insult, though, is internal and secret. The sober mom brings the cake into the clean garage, praises the touching gesture, but then refuses to let anybody eat it.
Explicitly fearing contamination or poison from the source. The candles burn down, filling the air with the smell of burnt frosting, the smell of wasted effort.
Unfulfilled promise. The cake remains uneaten, and Gately's profound shame is rooted in his passive complicity.
He didn't defend her. He didn't eat the cake. He didn't argue against the rumors of poisoning. He was just passive in the face of this profound injustice.
Then the mom secretly takes the cake into the kitchen and throws it out, upside down, a detail Gately verifies later by sneaking a look in the wastebasket.
All those hours of sacrifice, the dignity, the care, all reduced to garbage, its unfrosted bottom facing up.
His next action, placing 2 promotional packs of Benson & Hedges 100s in her mailbox, is so clearly a desperate, symbolic gesture of penance.
An attempt to repay the magnitude of her sacrifice, giving back the cigarettes she'd given up for him.
But it's too late. Mrs. Waite eventually hangs herself. She's found weeks later by a meter reader.
And the source notes that Gately, even years later, he rationalized her death, said it was her private troubles. He refused to connect it to the cake incident or his complicity.
But the severity of the trauma suggests this failure, this betrayal, is far from resolved.
And it is this specific, unresolved trauma of sacrifice and betrayal that now fuels his most important fever dream.
Gately's new pain and fever dream is an absolute fusion of his current agony and his deepest, most complicated childhood trauma. The physical setting itself is traumatic.
It's unmistakably and unavoidably Mrs. Waite's kitchen.
And the traumatic details are so forensic. You have the dried bugs in the light fixture, the overflowing ashtrays, the stacks of globes.
The maddening arrhythmic sink drip, and the foul smell of mildew and putrid fruit. It's a sensory recreation of a painful, despised space that Gately could never escape in his childhood.
He's sitting in the chair with the broken rung, the one he used to sit in as a kid. The only physical difference is profound.
His feet now reach the floor.
Yeah. It suggests a change in perspective, maybe a degree of adult understanding he lacked as a child, even though his physical body is still paralyzed by pain.
And the casting here is critical to understanding the symbolism. Mrs. Waite's role is now played by Jill Van Dyne.
She's sitting opposite him on what he now recognizes as the pink hemorrhoid pillow, but she's completely unveiled and starkers, naked.
This is the same inhumanly gorgeous body from the Churchill dream.
But the face is the absolute reversal of that grotesque Churchill scowl.
It's angelic. It has a beauty that's not sexy so much as angelic, described as if all the world's light had gotten together and arranged itself into the shape of a face.
A face of impossible, unplaceable beauty, the antithesis of controlling authoritarian pain.
And Gately realizes just instinctively that this figure is death incarnate.
He's sitting in this depressing kitchen, interfacing with the ultimate existential reality.
And death is explaining profound, fundamental truths to him, almost like a remedial lesson. It reinforces Gately's feeling that he missed that day in school.
The revelation is centered entirely on the cycle of life and death, confirming Gately has multiple lives. Death patiently confirms that at the end of each life, there is a woman who kills him and releases him into the next life.
This is the ultimate secret of existence.
And here is the core paradox that links this cosmic truth right back to Gately's intimate trauma.
Death reveals that this woman who kills you is always your next life's mother.
Wow.
The act of death, the ultimate betrayal and violence, the equivalent of the upside-down cake betrayal or his mother's neglect, is simultaneously redefined as the ultimate act of maternal connection and necessary rebirth.
This redefines everything about maternal love and debt.
Death explains that this is why mothers are so obsessively loving, why they try so hard, why they value your welfare above their own, and why there's always that slight, twinge of selfishness in their devotion.
The obsessive love, the devotion, the sense of an unpayable debt.
It's all an attempt to make amends for a murder. They're correcting for the act of killing the previous life, an act neither party can consciously remember, except, perhaps, in these powerful, fevered dreams.
It turns motherhood into a profound, unending obligation born out of necessary, unremembered violence.
And this sheds a new, devastating light on Gately's abusive, passed-out mother and the rejected, sacrificial Mrs. Waite. They were both desperately trying to pay a karmic debt they couldn't even name.
As this complex explanation of death continues, Gately gains this profound, vague understanding of the universe. But the knowledge just makes him deeply, profoundly sad.
Knowledge here doesn't bring peace. It brings existential sorrow.
His vision of Joel death becomes unfocused and wobbly, seen through a milky filter.
And the source explicitly links this visual distortion to how a baby sees a parental face bending over his crib. He's regressing to an infant state, literally seeing his future mother, his future killer, bending over him.
And he cries, the pain in his chest mirroring his physical wound. And he makes this direct, desperate plea to death. He asks her to set him free and be his mother.
He's begging for the cycle of violence and amends to begin anew with this angelic, uncorrupted figure.
The climax is profound and so ambiguous. Jolie Death either shakes or nods her lovely, unfocused head.
The ambiguity of that action is so unsettling.
And she issues the final potent command that leaves Gately suspended in agony and existential crisis. Wait.
He's just left in an existential holding pattern, dictated by the ultimate authority figure of death, paralyzed by pain, waiting for the resolution of this maternal debt.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. We've just analyzed two characters driven by these drastically different forms of pain.
Right.
The cold external logic of political violence in the AFR operation, and the searing internal trauma of Gately's psychological reckoning.
They operate on entirely different planes of existence, yet both hinge on concepts of sacrifice, debt, and ultimate control.
The contrast in motives is just so stark. It highlights these opposing ideologies about human life. On one hand, you have the AFR leadership, embodied by Balbelis.
Right, choosing to allow junior children to die for lire pays. A complete externalization of sacrifice rooted in geopolitical ideology.
Life is expendable if it doesn't fit the logistical capacity required for the state's mission. It's just cold, impersonal math.
But Gately's dream world offers a completely internalized, intimate definition of sacrifice. Death defines sacrifice and death not as a geopolitical calculation, but as the ultimate, necessary, intimate act of love.
A mother killing and renewing her child.
It reframes violence as an engine for existential debt and rebirth, turning every relationship into a kind of payment plan.
And both realities are also driven by the power of the unseen or the unspoken. The AFR mission relies on invisible deception.
The mirror trick, which uses the target's own headlights against them, and the unseen control exerted by Marathi, managing the operation remotely from Cambridge. The real threat is what you can't see until it's too late.
Gately's world, on the other hand, is driven by the unspoken truth, the dire secret of Mrs. Waite that the neighborhood could never articulate.
And the unspoken murder debt of the mother that Gately could only perceive through a fevered dream. In both worlds, the key mechanism of control is what is deliberately or unconsciously hidden.
And both narratives leave their central figures in this state of suspended waiting, though the stakes are dramatically different.
Balbelis waits in cold readiness for the inevitable, violent bus crash. He's prepared to sacrifice human lives to maintain mission resources. He's waiting for violence.
While Gately is commanded by the angelic figure of death to wait, what is he waiting for? Is it physical healing? The natural consequence of his injury?
Or is he waiting for the next life? The resolution of this maternal debt that his mother and Mrs. Waite couldn't pay?
He's waiting for grace? Or maybe just for the next painful phase of the cycle?
The immediate consequences set up massive tension for both realities. For the AFR, that modified van and the field team under Balbelis are perfectly positioned on the interstate for a high-risk, violent interception.
The acquisition of the Auteurs family is now truly imminent and potentially lethal. The external violence is about to explode.
And for Gately, while his body is still immobilized and in agony, his psyche has been irrevocably cracked open.
His entire past, his relationship with his abusive mother, his profound shame over the cake has been reframed by this revelatory dream cycle.
And the final command to wait, leaves him suspended in an existential holding pattern, paralyzed by pain and dictated to by the figure of Death Mother. The internal reckoning is just inescapable.
So, what does this all mean? We've analyzed two operations, one physical, one deeply spiritual, both hinging on sacrifice and control.
The AFR tries to control physical reality through mirrors and deceit, but their plans are always contaminated by those pesky human variables.
Whether it's Bruleem's rogue test subject,
Or just the number of children the van can hold.
and Gately grapples with the inability to control the painful truths revealed by his own unconscious mind. His body's pain just unlocks the reality that our deepest relationships are often founded on transactions we can't recall, debts we can't consciously pay.
So if I'm tracking this, Gailey's deepest emotional drives are literally corrections for things he can't even consciously remember.
Which makes every act of connection a kind of debt repayment.
And we've seen how knowledge is extracted under duress. 40 extracts data through fear and the threat of a lethal interview.
While Gately extracts profound knowledge about the universe and motherhood only through the searing intensity of his fevered, physically agonizing state, the deepest truths are paid for with the highest price.
The most compelling insight here is that maternal paradox, the idea that even the most seemingly disconnected figures,
The reviled neighbor, Mrs. Waite, who sacrificed her comfort for a cake.
the abusive, passed-out mother, the desirable figure of Joel Van Dyne, and the figure of death.
They're all locked together in a cycle of love, debt, and necessary painful violence.
They're all facets of the same existential force.
Given the power dynamics we observed, and this idea that the ultimate love requires the ultimate sacrifice, the mother killing and renewing her child, we want to leave you, the learner, with this final provocative thought.
The sources suggest our deepest drives may in fact be silent corrections for forgotten trauma and unremembered debts. If that's true, when you look at the major relationships or sacrifices in your life, are you performing an act of amends? And for whose forgotten trauma are you trying to pay the price? The debt, it seems, is always due.